Welcome to episode 8 of The Dirty Corner. Now, this is a bit of a special episode. It's taken a bit of preparation to get this right because I'm going to be sharing a video with you. Now, the video is quite long, but I think it's worth watching in its entirety, unedited, because I don't want there to be any questions about the accuracy and the context of the conversation. This is something which I'm going to be discussing in the next episode because I'm just going to let the video play and let you watch it and have your own thoughts. There are things that I would have changed and done better, and there are things which I think were done very well. I think that my studio friend did very well. I think some of the language used by the faculty was quite interesting and incriminating, but I'm just keen to see what you think of it. This is the email that I received alongside my studio friend to inform us that we were being summoned to a meeting in order to be part of this disciplinary procedure. Dear Simon, I am emailing to inform you that an allegation of misconduct has been made against you, and that this is being considered under the attached disciplinary procedure for students. It has been reported that on the 1st of April 2022 you uploaded a podcast to YouTube which contains defamatory and derogatory material which has caused offence, anxiety and stress to both students and staff on your programme. It's also been reported that the impact of your actions is causing interference with the academic delivery of the programme. The case is being considered under the summary stage 1 of the disciplinary procedure for students, and you are required to attend a meeting with, let's say, faculty number 1, Dean of Faculty Social and Life Sciences. The interview will take place on Thursday the 5th of May at 1:30 and will be convened through Microsoft Teams. Another member of staff will be present to act as a witness to the proceedings. You should refer to Section 7 of the attached procedure and provide confirmation by Wednesday 27th of April that you agree to the matter being dealt with under the summary procedure and will attend the meeting. If you wish to submit any written evidence for consideration, this should be submitted by Tuesday the 3rd of May. You have the right to be accompanied at the interview by a friend, a member of staff, or a representative of the students' union. And then it just kind of gives details for how I can contact the students' union. And I ended up attending with my studio friend. So this episode is called My Disciplinary Meeting.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
And welcome. Thank you for coming along today. It'd probably be fairly obvious from what's written on the bottom of the screens that I'm the Director for Strategic Planning and Student Administration, and it's in my area that responsibility for the procedures such as student disciplinary sit, and I'm sort of coordinating, leading discussion today, and Alan is here to make notes and make sure that I don't sort of deviate from what we're supposed to be talking about. The manager in the quality and regulations team here at the university.
Yeah.
So we've got an hour booked in. We hopefully won't need all of that. And in the meeting, so doing it by Zoom, or not by Zoom, by whatever this is, Teams. So I'm sure you're both familiar with this over the last few years. We'll just give each other a chance to answer. And I will be, although we're meeting both of you together, I would ask if, when we talk about things, that you each give the other a chance to answer as well. And sort of each answer on your own behalf. And these are things that I just say at all of these sorts of meetings, so I don't feel that I'm somehow saying something particular to you. So that was sort of just the initial comments. And I think the first thing I'd do is just also acknowledge what a difficult last couple of years it's been for everyone. and that includes within higher education and for staff and for students, and that's put a lot of pressures on people. So I think that's part of the context of all of this. We've written to you to ask if you can attend and say thank you for attending today, because as you're aware, there is an allegation against you both, and that's what I'd like to sort of discuss today to see if we can find a way forward in relation to that. Before, as I say, what I don't want to have to happen unless it's unavoidable is progressing this to a more formal stage. But we'll see how we get on today, and as I say, we'll hopefully be able to have a good discussion about it. So we've got this allegation, as I say, we know it's been difficult. I think the other comment I'd just make before I pause is that we are keen as an institution to hear the student voice and to get your views. And obviously there are mechanisms, and I don't know if you've taken the opportunity to use those through the course rep system, through student voice fora, through Uni2 to give feedback. Obviously you've provided some feedback through a podcast. I'm aware that in a sense the institution wasn't named, but I think, and we'll sort of come on to this, it's fairly self-evident we're talking about. So you've done that, which in itself, that's fine. The key issue really for us, and why I was keen to meet today, is just to get your views on what's happened, and in particular the impact that we've had reported from other students and from staff. And that's really, for me, it's less a question of, you said this or you said that in the podcast or whatever. It's the impact that it's had on staff and students. And obviously for the students, as you'll know yourselves, you're coming up to the final sort of critical time in terms of final assessment. And as I say, we have received other concerns about this from staff and students who felt that even though, again, you haven't named either the institution, several people have felt that individuals could in fact be identified from what was said in the podcast. And as I say, the impact has been noted and has not been a good one on people. So that's my way of sort of opening. And before I sort of ask a few questions, I'm just wondering if either of you have got any questions about the meeting or why we're here.
I'm curious as to why it wasn't accepted as a vexatious claim, because I thought that was fairly self-evident.
Sorry, I missed the first bit of that. Did you say it's a vexatious claim?
I was curious why it wasn't accepted as a vexatious claim, because I thought we evidenced that in our response.
Well, we've had evidence that what we're really looking at here, as I say, is that we've had evidence and got evidence from students and staff as to the hurt and upset that what's in the podcast has caused. So that's what I'd like to explore.
But what we put forth was that it's a vexatious claim because of the history of bullying and exclusion by tutors and students, which I'm pursuing as a formal complaint, and it feels retaliatory.
As I say, I'm aware that you're pursuing a separate complaint now, and I think that's progressed through to the OIA, and obviously that will be then followed through and looked at by them. If you want to and feel that in some way there's a separate or an accompanying complaint in relation to this matter, then you're absolutely free to put something in there. What I'm just keen to do is to see if through a conversation, I guess from my perspective, from what I've heard and seen, both from looking at your podcast and from hearing from others on the programme, is whether or not you think, perhaps ask first, what do you think in terms of the impact this might have had? Do you have a sense that there has been an impact, and if so, what that's been, and what your feelings are around that?
I'm not sure. I think the main impact that I've seen are the issues that we discussed in the email regarding the bullying that's been happened. Like that's the main impact that I've seen regarding this, is the people that were affected by the issues that we raised in the email.
Okay, so from your perspective, if I'm right, I'm just trying to understand here, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. If I understand it, then you think the impact has been that those students that have, and this relates then perhaps to what you were referring to, Simon, separate issues that have been raised and complaints, for those students that have been bullied, that's where actually the impact is on those students.
Yeah.
And from their perspective then, do you think that the impact for those students has been a positive one of this podcast?
From those students that were bullied?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, because it's being talked about in a sensitive manner. They feel like they're finally being heard by someone.
Okay. Thank you. And do you think that for those that haven't been bullied, or haven't said they've been bullied, and others on the cohort or even staff, do you think that, or aware that there's been any impact?
I don't know.
Okay. Simon, I guess the same question to you then, really, in terms of an awareness of what the impact perhaps is on other students and staff.
I've discussed with the students who were impacted by the bullying, just as he said, and they felt a great amount of relief and respect the fact of how we've presented the incidents that we experienced. And for us to be put through a disciplinary for communicating it that way seems strange when the incidents that we describe are far more severe than a podcast which discusses that sensitively. And
any impact, do you think, on other students? So you've talked to students that you say have been bullied. Any sense of any impact on other students?
Which other students do you mean?
Are you saying that all students have been bullied? I'm not quite sure. You said you talked to those that have been bullied.
No, but there are quite a few students, not just on our year, who've been made aware of what's happened, and who will be aware of behaviour since the pandemic as well, as they've been known to play their music loud, to graffiti on the walls, to weld iron and steel in a studio, and all sorts of things that are just, risking the health and safety of students. Now, this is egregious incidents that really should have been investigated and disciplined, but I haven't discussed with most of the cohort this because I work remotely and I'm only in touch with a certain amount of students. So the ones who I've discussed this with have really appreciated it. And that's a good little group of people who have been sidelined from my experience. Whereas any students who I've not discussed this with, I've spoken to one student who didn't want to take part in the complaint and who seems to be in allegiance with, which I know sounds weird, but it's just how it's worked out. And she doesn't seem too affected by it. I think if anything, it's just gossip and it's a bit of interest for people, whereas I don't think that there's really been much harm or effect on people, aside from maybe some people feeling a bit exposed by incidents being described as opposed to people. We don't describe any individual in enough detail to identify them.
Okay, I guess back to you. So I'm right to think you're not aware of and perhaps don't think that there could be any harmful or sort of upsetting impact for people. You don't think that people who've heard this, you're not aware of anyone who's been upset by this or affected negatively?
No, not really. Like Simon said, I think that most people probably feel is caught out at the fact that we've discussed these issues because they are severe. And if they've been able to identify themselves when we haven't managed to describe them, then that shows an issue with the severity of the issue as opposed to what we'd said.
Okay. Simon, you're nodding. So you'd answer pretty similarly, would you, to that question?
I would, yeah.
Okay. And in terms, so I just want also to be clear in a sense, so the issues that you're talking about, because again, I don't want any sense that matters that you're raising aren't being considered appropriately. The issues that you've referred to in terms of, as I say, that you've obviously used the word bullied, and you've referred to other matters that sort of weren't acceptable. Those are all ones that you're satisfied are captured in the ongoing complaint?
To a certain degree, to be honest, since this has happened with our podcasts and being called to a disciplinary, I've been made aware of the messages that sent to several people regarding images he was going to get printed on a t-shirt to torment. Again, it just seems emblematic of the problem where a student representative who's supposed to be part of the protocol for us to be heard is using his kind of malicious nature against one of the most vulnerable students in the studio. And so even since this, we've just had examples of their nature being quite arrogant and aggressive, whereas the people who are trying to be heard aren't doing this maliciously. We're not trying to make anyone feel bad. That's not the intention of anything. We just wanted to communicate our experience honestly. And I think we did that with quite a bit of diplomacy, to be honest, and care to ensure that we didn't implicate anyone specifically or the school.
Okay. A couple of things I guess from that is that if you think that's required, so I don't want you to think, as I say, that things are being ignored if you feel they need to be escalated. So that's just a point, really. And then the second point, again, from what you said, Simon, I think is that you just said your intention was to set out to give an honest view as to your experiences, and also you didn't set out to cause upset or offence or whatever either. I think that was pretty much what you said, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. And is in terms of asking you your intentions, if you like, behind the podcast and what you set out to do, how would you respond to that?
Our intentions were to be honest and to be sensitive to everyone when we were discussing these things. It wasn't like we'd set out the podcast to only talk about our experiences. It was to do other things as well, like talking about art and how we go about our creative process. So it wasn't, we hadn't made it just to dish out at the uni or the people there. We wanted to give our honest opinions when we felt like we had to, but that wasn't the entire premise of the podcast.
No. Okay.
I'm sorry, mate. Before you continue, I'd just like to respond to something you said earlier, which was you don't want us to feel as though any of our complaints are being ignored about any of our concerns. And my experience is they are being ignored, I'm afraid. And I just feel like it's worth mentioning to you that when I spoke to in the first year separately about what happened to when said to her, "Shut up, you Nazi," I told they said, "Leave it with me," and nothing was done. They told me she was going to leave months later. I went back to separately. They said, leave it with me, and nothing was done. It feels like it was ignored. And when the announcement of leaving happened on Teams on a recorded video, mock the reason and correct why she left. Because accurately, she left because she was being bullied by and that's pretty much how they characterize it. And I have submitted as evidence an email from which states that my characterization of the events is accurate, according to her.
Okay, it's examples. Yeah, noted, Simon. And as I say, in a sense, my involvement comes in at the sort of, you know, in the when formal complaints and so on are raised at the institutional level. So I guess what I can talk with the faculty about the sort of the points you've made there. I guess what I was thinking of was that in terms of the process that's been open to you, but you're obviously referencing now to something that's in effect gone on since you've been a student, really.
Well, if I may, the Unity platform was something I was suspended from as well. And I have screenshots of my messages on there. There was nothing inappropriate about them. And my suspicion is that it was who was removing my messages because we have had meetings where we've disagreed and he's not been supportive of my characterization of the complaint. And it seems like a lot of protection for over the security of students is my impression of the meeting which I had with him. And that's why I feel as though my comments were taken down from the Unity platform. I appealed against that decision and it was overturned, but I've had a message removed since without it being part of a strike system. But initially it was a strike system where I was given 3 strikes and then a third strike and was removed and unable to communicate on there when I had said nothing inappropriate at all, and which is, you know, proven by my appeal, which I won.
Okay. So if there are any of these things that you are referencing, you feel you want to make a formal complaint about that, then obviously that opportunity is open to you as a student. So yeah, just a reminder really about that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I apologise. It wasn't my formal complaint. I put it up for review and it was denied. That's why I'm now, you know, through to YAs, because this was all mentioned in my formal complaint. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll wait to see what they say. So just coming back then to the podcast, and clearly there's a context which informs this from your perspective and the experiences that you've had. All of what we've been talking about, I guess, has fed into your experiences. As I referenced at the start, I think our concern has been, and this applies to any situation where something that arises, whether it's from staff or students, that causes and gets reported to us in terms of the effect that it's had on them in a negative way, we need to look at. So we've talked about that and your perceptions of, you know, the impact, and also about your intentions in putting up the podcast and so on. So in terms of next, of any sort of further steps or action, if you like, do you feel that there's anything, and as I'm just asking these questions, is there anything you feel that you need to do now as a result of, you know, having learnt that people have been upset by this or have been affected badly in terms of, say, both students and staff? Do you think there's anything there that you want to do, feel you should do? What do you think first, and then Simon?
I'm not really sure.
Okay, Simon.
It does seem strange to me that we're being asked to consider the feelings of the people who've bullied others, because we've hurt their feelings, talking about them bullying others. And we should change our action, our behaviours when we've taken as many steps as possible to make sure that they are protected, as far as there's no one who can look up online who hasn't been to the school and doesn't already know us to sort of look up and say, this is it's not on our social media, it's not listed or labelled. We're not doing that to try and make the school be damaged or the individuals. We're discussing the events and we're not describing the people, we're describing the events. And to protect the feelings of the people who've done those things it's not something we are trying to attack, but it's certainly not something we need to take any steps, in my opinion, to further protect, because we've done nothing where they can be identified outside of them saying, oh, that was me who said that to, or that was me who, burnt crude oil in there. I mean, these are just completely egregious events to happen where it endangers the health and safety of everyone there. And we're being asked to consider their feelings is a strange position to try and answer that question, I must admit.
I mean, I was asking if you thought there was anything. I wasn't necessarily suggesting that something should be done. I was just wanting to get a sense from you as to whether or not, as I say, you felt there should be anything, and that's absolutely fine. In terms of, this is about getting your views as well. Where we are in this, as I say, then this was really just a chance for me, who's not been, involved in any of the detail of this up till this point, to have a chat with you both, and for me to get a sense of perspective on all of this. And as I say, I recognise that in the procedures we've got, you had an opportunity to, which you took, to not agreeing for this to be considered. And I know you provided material in relation to that, not being considered in the summary stage. So the next steps will be what I sort of consider, and that could be that in a sense nothing else happens, or it could be that it may go to into the formal stage of the university's procedures, and I think you both had a copy of that, so that would tell you what would happen next. And yeah, just reflect further really. I think I'll ask you and both of you in a minute if there's anything else you want to add or comment on. And I'd also just reference the fact that if then after this meeting either of you think of anything else or want to come back, then that offer also remains there. And once, as I say, once we've finished this meeting and I've had a look again at all the information, I'll take a view as to the next steps. But Simon, anything else you want to comment on?
I'm surprised that we haven't had an informal mediation where before it came to a disciplinary, even an informal disciplinary, to have an informal mediation would have been probably a step I expected to have, where we could discuss with the parties involved what's happened and how they feel, as opposed to what's happened. And I'm also disappointed that it wasn't thrown out as vexatious, because I do think there's enough evidence there to show that. So I would hope that there would be safeguards put in place to protect students in the future, because my experience has been disturbing. I've been really upset and disturbed by what I've seen, and the people who are most vulnerable have been hurt.
Okay, thank you.
I feel as though we're being penalised for talking openly and honestly about our experiences in a sensitive manner, where I've looked through my Instagram, I've looked through all of my social medias, I've never mentioned where I study, and the issues that we talk about, they're not okay. And it's clearly evident that what we're talking about is the truth, Otherwise, those people couldn't have identified themselves in the first place. And I think that should be the main concern of this, not the fact that we spoke about it sensitively on a podcast. It should be what we actually spoke about and how that's affected the people that were targeted.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify, this process, even if it's perhaps felt a bit like it, there's no penalties, certainly not so far at all been talked about. This has just been a process, from my perspective, to just make sure that actually the right course of action is followed. So it's not as if this is somehow a penalty, but apologies if it's felt a bit like it today. Also note what you said, Simon, about mediation. We may or may not be, in a sense, past that point. I'm also conscious that I think I'm right in thinking you're both in your final year, aren't you? With finals that's coming up, yeah. But that's a useful point to have noted, Simon. I don't think I've got anything else. As I say, I will just have a look at everything else again, and we'll be in touch. It's going to be next week. But as I say, don't think at the moment at all that this is, in a sense, a penalty. It's been helpful for me today to hear what you've both got to say. Thank you, and thank you for participating in an open and constructive way. As I say, the options really are, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that this doesn't progress any further, or that it progresses to the next stage. I think those are basically the two options, aren't they, I think? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. And as I say, if there's anything else you want to share individually, then you've got the complaints email address, which I know is not the most user-friendly email address, but if there's anything further either of you want to come back with in relation to this, then feel free to do that. And as I say, you'll hear from, hear from us into next week. So, unless there's anything else, then thank you both very much for your time.
It'll be next week when we hear back, yeah?
It will, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
That was the meeting. Wasn't pleasant necessarily to rewatch that. I've not watched it since. I mean, I've seen bits of the video, but I've not watched it in its entirety. And then having to type out the captions for the video was, I don't know, it just kind of brought up a lot of thoughts and feelings. I will reflect on my impression of things that were said in the video next week, and I'll also disclose what the outcome of the meeting was, because as he said, there was two options: either we don't proceed, or they'll be taking further action and making it a formal stage of the disciplinary. So I will discuss what happens next week, along with my thoughts and feelings around what was said in that meeting. But I do think that my studio friend did a very good job of communicating, far better than I did, where I would just dump out my feelings at times when I should have said less. But it was hard because it was an emotionally intense meeting, even though it may not have looked like it. It was definitely something where I think we were both just shaking after the meeting and during it and before it. But I hope you enjoyed the episode. There will be more videos, not as long as that one. That's the longest video I'll share, but there will be videos that I'll share to give context of what happened in the different events that are coming up in these stories. All of these episodes lead to the Dirty Corner and why this podcast is given that name. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next week.